Be still and know that I am. Psalm 46:10. Even from my earliest religious teachings that guided me to respect the silence of an uncluttered mind, as a young child, I recall sitting alone on our backyard swing early one summer morning before the noisy throngs of neighborhood baby boomer children arrived for play. And I heard the repeated coo, coo of a mourning dove. I named him the lonely bird because I only heard it when no one else was around. And being still is the only way that ever happens. I first learned the idea of meditation about 50 years ago during the counterculture of the 60s. Kind of seemed like the in thing to do. Sit in a lotus position and say, Om. But I had no guidance for the patient to practice it correctly. And so it was just a novelty. It was not a habit. Fast forward to the early 90s when I studied it more intensively along with other Zen practices at a 3-week retreat in Vermont, where I learned that the reason for meditation is so that a person can calm and empty one's mental bandwidth in order to be fully aware of the present. There's not so much just to waste time sitting around still doing nothing, but rather training my mind to focus on the stillness and to rid itself of unnecessary distraction. And then, and only then, could I begin to truly pay attention to the world more closely, without all those filters of my raging ego and my petty stress and my unrelenting emotions. And what was left in my empty mind? Space. To let in the simplicity of what is. Things that routinely get ignored, like sweet smells and warm sunshine and gentle breezes that push the leaves around to make patterns on the grass below. And then a sense of renewal to just go out and do the next thing that needs doing. Maybe not perfectly, but at least with full attention. Over the last 40-some years, I've had many occasions to resurrect that quiet meditation and some couple of mantras to help me navigate difficult times, as well as the daily drudgery. It's nice to come back to centering myself and trusting that I have a reliable tool to pull out of my bag of tricks to do so. When I can be still, I find that I know that I am alive and part of a pulsing world that needs me to see it, to sense it, to pay attention to it, and to react to it carefully. Let us all begin this morning by being still and knowing the beauty of this moment together.
And since there's two of you, do you want to open the Wonder Box and see what's inside? Because there's two things inside. Go ahead. Creak. What's in there? You can hold it. A mouse and a bell. I think they might be in our story. You want to set them here on the bench so people can see them? Perfect. All right, you guys want to have a seat? You can sit here or with your parents, wherever you'd like. This is a story called The Coconut Monk by Thich Nhat Hanh. There once was a monk who lived on a small island in Vietnam. Do you know where Vietnam is? Okay, I'm going to show you on our globe later. He spent his time sitting in a coconut tree and eating coconuts, so people called him the Coconut Monk. How those names sort of happen, isn't it? The coconut monk had two good friends, a cat and a mouse. Every day they would climb up the coconut tree and play together. Have you heard of such a thing as a cat and a mouse playing together? The coconut monk enjoyed sitting high in the tree with his friends. He would watch boats going by on the Mekong Delta and listen, just like Peggy was talking about, to the birds sing. The coconut monk, though, lived in a time when Vietnam was at war. All the fighting made him very sad. One day he went out walking, and while he walked, he collected bits of metal, pieces of bombs and bullets that littered the land. I wonder why he did that. Do you have any ideas? No? What's your idea, Aurora? Maybe he was going to dispose of them. Well, he melted all the pieces and molded them together to make a beautiful bell. He told the pieces of metal, "Now you have been playing the game of war. Now you can help create peace." And every night before going to sleep, he would strike the bell. Its music echoed out into the night sky. The coconut monk decided to go and ask the president to stop the war. He didn't have any belongings, so packing was very easy. He just climbed down the tree and he was ready to go. But the coconut monk didn't go along. Who do you think came with him? The cat and the mouse came along to keep him good company. It's always good to have company when you're going to do hard things, isn't it? They traveled for many days and nights. Even though the road was rough and the journey long, they stopped often to notice the beauty around them. At night, the monk slept leaning against a tree, and the cat and the mouse slept together in a basket. Sometimes it was rainy and cold, and the friends huddled together. Sometimes it was warm and the sunshine was out, and they played and romped around. Finally, they reached the presidential palace, a huge white building surrounded by guards, and the guards would not let him in. What can you, a simple monk, have to say to the president? They demanded. The coconut monk held up the basket with the cat and the mouse playing happily together. "I would like all people to live together in peace," he said, "the way that my friends, the cat and the mouse, do. Surely our differences are not bigger than theirs." When the guards heard this, they became angry. "You fool," they shouted, and they grabbed the monk and they threw him in prison. But because the cat and the mouse wouldn't leave their friend, the guards had to throw them in prison too. Can you believe that? A cat and a mouse in prison, along with a monk, just trying to bring peace. The prison was dark and cold, but the coconut monk sat very quietly and continued to breathe peacefully, just as he had in his coconut tree. The coconut monk shared his food with the cat and the mouse and all the other prisoners. And even though there wasn't much food, the cat didn't eat the mouse. What is it they say in Nemo? Friends don't eat friends, right? People started asking about the coconut monk. They wrote letters and they visited him in prison. And soon those guards had no choice but to release him. The monk, the cat, and the mouse returned to their coconut tree. If a cat and a mouse can live together in peace, do you think we humans can too? I do too. And that is the story about the coconut monk. And you may not know that is based off of a true story. And we can talk a little more about that. And I'll be sure to share it. So adults, if you don't know that story, you can look it up. And now you guys can follow me out to our class for today.
Hello. So slight change in your order of service. I am obviously not Peggy. And I will be reading a poem that I wrote entitled Hesitation Point. There are moments that hit with such blunt force, they blast us apart like supernovas and loom, haunted with eternal anniversary. There are moments that sing with such joy, they sprout fields of sunflowers in our souls and grow fabled and crystalline with time. We believe that our life is designed for such moments of loud punctuation, so we wind ourselves around them like tight balls of tangled twine. But look, see those hawks gliding like kites over the green hills? Life is constructed through small bits of wonder. Each molecule heated by the sun rises so that another may take its place. Each modest minute gathers into the chapters of our stories like an imperial column of air lifting great birds towards the heavens.
The second reading is called From Blossoms by Lee Young Lee. From blossoms come this brown paper bag of peaches. We bought them from the boy at the bend in the road, where we turned toward signs that were painted, peaches. From laden boughs, from hands, from sweet fellowship in the bins, comes the nectar at the roadside. Succulent peaches we devour. Dusky skin and all, comes the familiar dust of summer. It's dust we eat. Oh, to take what we love inside, to carry within us an orchard, to eat not only the skin, but the shade, not only the sugar, but the days, to hold that fruit in our hands and just adore it, and then bite into the round jubilance of peach. These are days we live as if death were nowhere in the background, from joy to joy, from wing to wing, from blossom to impossible sweet blossom. Our speaker this morning is Sensei Frank Seisho Diaz, PhD, and he is the current and director and spiritual leader of the Open Mind Zen Indiana. Frank began studying Zen at Tallahassee's Cypress Tree Zen Center in 1994. Along with teaching Zen, he is also founder and former director of the Institute for mindfulness-based wellness and pedagogy, and leads mindfulness workshops for teachers and artists and the general public across the United States. He is on the faculty at Indiana University, where he teaches and conducts research on mindfulness in the performing arts and education. Welcome, Frank Diaz.
Good morning. Take a deep breath, if you will, with me. It's always, I guess I grew up Catholic. So sometimes whenever I enter any kind of sanctuary, I get a little bit of that Catholic tightness I had as a kid, where I felt everything had to go just right. And so my body gets, so I wonder if you could do this with, you just take a deep breath for me and exhale slowly. Okay, we're in a Unitarian church. This is a little better. Little more laid back. I'm delighted to be here today. This is my second time here on the podium. I think last time I was here was 2019, before the pandemic. And I'm really delighted today that I'm just giving the message, because I think last time I had to do quite a number of things that I was unfamiliar with, even though I am a member of the congregation at the Unitarian Universalist Church in Bloomington. Like many of you, I regret to inform that I'm mindful about 50% of the time of what's going on. And the other 50%, I'm daydreaming a little bit because it's early, but I'm glad today I get to deliver this message. Last winter, while I was dropping my daughter off at school, I was unexpectedly blessed by the appearance of a Buddha. And when I say this, I imagine that some people might think that, well, Frank saw a deity. Maybe a luminous one descending from the sky in lotus pose, radiating peace and blessings to the kids and parents in the elementary school parking lot, because that's where Buddhas go. But in my tradition of Zen, we say Buddhas come in many forms. You're a Buddha. I'm a Buddha. As many of you know, your pets are Buddhas sometimes. The trees are Buddhas. Buddhas in the Zen tradition are old women selling tea by the road, hermits, children, and animals. And Buddhas, in this sense, are what sentient beings do, not about who they are. Because in Zen, Buddha, or awakened nature, pervades the entire universe. This is a really important point when we talk about our ideas about Buddhism versus our experiences. We all have Buddha experiences. We all come from the same fabric of reality that allows us at any given moment to be a Buddha or not. And this is important. On that day in question, the Buddha appeared in an interaction between two young children, probably no older than 8 or 9 years old. They were walking to school together. It was a really gray and cold December morning. One of the children was a little girl. She was sobbing uncontrollably. And the other was a little boy who gently put his arm around her and consoled her. Now, from behind the closed window of my car, I'm a Floridian, so the windows are always closed during the winter. I couldn't hear what they were saying, but I didn't need to understand with words. That little arm, that kid, that little girl bawling, to me, that was witnessing compassion. I was witnessing there in that interaction between two young children. And I think, like many of us, when we see those kinds of things, we sense it in our hearts. One of my favorite things to ask people is to say, tell me about someone you love, but someone you know who just brings that love out of you. And what normally people will do is they'll put their hand in their heart, right over their heart, indicating again that the love is a very sensory thing. It's a thing that we experience, right? It's the root of empathy in many ways, because we can't experience what another human being is actually experiencing, but we can resonate a little bit in our hearts. And in that moment, I felt that. In the psychology of empathy, compassion is an action that results from responding sympathetically to others. And that's a really key distinction here. It's not just enough to feel that for another person, but to actually respond. As a researcher in the world of education, one of the things that we find with teachers is that they, like many professions, that help experience burnout. And what we have found over the years is that burnout is not necessarily a function of the teacher's feeling of empathy, which I think most teachers feel. It's a feeling of not being able to do anything with that empathy, not being able to convert that into action or compassion. So often people who are empathetic, teachers, doctors, nurses, will tend to burn out a lot less if they can experience that their action in some ways is helping, right? That they're doing something with that. And that morning, I was seeing that with those two little kids, and it softened my heart. It really softened my heart. And for the hours following that, I remember my speech was a little gentler. My actions were a little kinder. My heart was more open. Yeah, Buddhas come in many forms. Buddhas come in many forms. In January, we lost a beloved teacher of kindness and compassion, Thich Nhat Hanh, who was a revered Buddhist monk. He was well known for his work on mindfulness and engaged Buddhism, wrote about how our lives are intertwined. They're intertwined. What is in us goes out into the world and then returns, including simple acts with good intentions. A smile, a gentle touch, or even mindful listening. Now, I don't know about you, but in a lot of my experience, we're often not listening. We're being there with a person. We're hearing them. And we're often quite caught up in our own thoughts about how we're going to respond, what we're going to say, whether we're going to be right, whether we're going to have an argument, whether we're going to agree. And I think, like many of you, I often sense when a person is actually mindfully listening to me. Might not have anything to say. They're just listening. I laugh a little bit about this because I grew up in a culture where my dad always told my mom what to do after she expressed some dismay. I'm feeling dismayed. Well, let me fix it for you. And I remember at some point when my mom finally got the courage to say to my dad, a good lesson for me, being a teenager watching this, saying, I don't need you to do anything. I just need you to listen. So often just being present for people, mindfully listening, letting go of our thoughts and expectations can be a very powerful way of showing this compassion. On the topic of inner being, the Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh wrote, happiness is not an individual matter. It has the nature of interbeing. When you're able to make one friend smile, her happiness will nourish you also. When you find ways to foster peace and joy and happiness, you do it for everyone. In Buddhism, there's a deity known as Kuan Yin, Avalokiteshvara, or Padmipana, who manifests through many forms and throughout space and time to alleviate the suffering of others. Often when I do my Zen group here, by the way, this is my plug. There is a Zen community that meets here at the church Sundays, every other Sunday at 2:30. I got that right. So you're always welcome to come and sit with us. Today is typically the day that we do it. We are having one this week and then every other week from here on out. So Kuan Yin, I normally put a little statue of Kuan Yin in the back. And if you go to a lot of traditional Buddhist centers, especially Zen centers, they're associated with sort of very masculine form of Zen, very quiet, dignified. And by the way, I mean stereotypically masculine, non-reactive, almost logical, a little linear sometimes. And I'm very drawn to Avalokiteshvara because Avalokiteshvara is not the opposite of that, but quite literally the manifestation of joy and compassion, which is an action. It's not necessarily sitting back. It's not just allowing ourselves to transcend the world, but actually to be in it and do something. So Kuan Yin, in my favorite depiction of this being, Kuan Yin manifests as a female bodhisattva with 1,000 arms and 1,000 eyes within those arms. So imagine this incredible being with 1,000 arms and then just eyes everywhere. So she can see everything. She can see everything. And sometimes I like to imagine that we as human beings are that body of Kuan Yin. So Kuan Yin not being necessarily a being that's outside of us. This is Kuan Yin in this congregation right now. Any group of people gathered who are working towards compassion can be Kuan Yin. Now, when one of those little eyes, well, they're probably big eyes, a big bean. One of those eyes sees suffering, the arm moves in response. So Kuan Yin's eye sees suffering, the arm moves in response. And as that arm moves, so do all the others, right? So there's this interbeing, there's this nature of Kuan Yin being depicted as a creature or as a being that when she sees something, she responds, but everything responds with it. Right? Very consistent with the idea in Buddhism that we are interconnected, that no action that we take is really separate in any way. In a talk last year by one of my Dharma sisters, Sensei Kelly Garza, who teaches Zen down in South Florida, she described the many ways that the universe had come together to alleviate the suffering of a dear friend who was waiting for a kidney transplant. And this is a person who waited many years for a kidney transplant. So I will give a little bit of this story, which I think really beautifully demonstrates this idea. In the story, she talks about meeting, going down to Melbourne, which is where our Zen Center is located, and meeting Sensei David Vidito, who is one of the teachers down there. And Sensei greeted her with a really beautiful, very David greeting, which is very open and warm, made her feel at home immediately. And they built a really beautiful friendship that's been going strong for over a decade now. Now, years later, David finds out that Kelly has a friend who needs a kidney transplant and they can't find a match. David, being the guy he is, decides, let me see if I'm a match. And so he goes to the hospital to find out, oh my goodness, you're a match. And so David volunteers a way to give his kidney to a complete stranger, right? A friend of a friend. As Kelly boarded the plane to go see her friend, get this kidney from David, they had to go to a facility. I forgot it. Thinking it was in Oklahoma, but I might be wrong about that. She kept thinking about all the things that had to come together in order for her friend to receive that kidney, right? There's a pilot driving that plane, completely unaware that they were carrying people to that town for another person to receive a kidney and live. There were the folks giving, the staff giving food on the airplane, the airline workers, the custodial workers who were keeping the hospital clean so that no one got sick during that visit, the receptionist, right? Indeed, if you look at this, there's a whole universe of actors in that single act. And almost none of them, outside of the doctor and the handful of people there, knew the impact of that. It's extraordinary, really, when we think about our lives right now at this very moment. And all of the many ways in which Kuan Yin supports us. Right? Kuan Yin is already active here in that little action that sends another action and another action, and another action into place, and in all the hidden ways in which we are supported. During the last several years, our world has been on fire. And there's no doubt about that. There's COVID, political divisiveness, international conflict, economic and racial inequality, climate change, political divisiveness, science denial, and many maladies that probably threaten and unravel that fragile mandala of inner being that we all participate and belong to. In the presence of such overwhelming forces, it might feel trivial to engage in these little acts of kindness and compassion. To think of the recent Supreme Court decision, and I have a 9-year-old daughter. And I think, what can I, as a Zen teacher, professor, resident of Bloomington, Indiana, do that's going to change a decision that's going to affect my daughter, my wife, my friends, and so many people in ways that I find ethically problematic. And it's hard. It's difficult to think about those things. On the other hand, these things really do matter, or at least they should. There really is no inherent contradiction between the big and the small here, right? And this talk is about the little things, right? There's no fight between the 1,000 arms and eyes. They work together. On that morning that I saw that little boy, I had been suffering from grief. I really had been. It'd been a really tough month. I was in grief about the mass, the unnecessary deaths, the looming threat of canceled plans, the isolation, my daughter's future, and the seeming helplessness of changing anything at all. But in the presence of that little boy's compassion, I saw another possibility. I saw just a little glimpse of another possibility. If that little boy can soften my heart, perhaps I can do the same. Perhaps these little acts of kindness, these little moments of softness, have the power to change things in ways we can't understand and often are not aware of. The monk Dogen, who is the person who, in my tradition, we look towards as a guiding light, reminds us in the haunting evening bell chant that is often chanted at Zen retreats in this country and beyond, to embrace the present moment, right? To not squander it, to be here, to act compassionately in the moment. And I'll share this chant with you. I heard it the first time beautifully chanted at Upaya Zen Center in New Mexico by the abbot of that particular center, who had a doctorate in musicology and voice performance. So it was really striking to hear in this wooden, big, beautiful wood hall and hear Joshin sing this out at the end of a long day in that retreat. So Dogen says, and this chant says, "Let me respectfully remind you that life and death are of supreme importance. Time swiftly passes by and the opportunity is lost. Each of us should strive to awaken, take heed, do not squander your life." That cold morning, under that cloudy winter sky, I held my daughter's hand just a little longer and whispered, "I love you so much, sweetie, and I hope that you know that. Have a great day at school." And although I couldn't see her mouth under her mask, I could see her little brown eyes soften. And she said to me, "I love you too, Dad." What an opportunity. 1,000 eyes and arms, indeed.
The power of one. One song can spark a moment. One flower can wake the dream. One tree can start a forest. One bird can herald spring. One smile begins a friendship. One hand clasp lifts a soul. One star can guide a ship at sea. One word can shape a goal. One vote can change a nation. One sunbeam lights a room. One candle wipes out darkness. One laugh will conquer gloom. One step must start each journey. One word must start each prayer. One hope will raise our spirits. One touch can show you care. One voice can speak with wisdom. One heart will know what's true. One life can make a difference. You see, it's just up to you. Go forth this week and look for one thing that is special in your life.